Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel Read With Me. Today I am here not with another short story from any collection, rather I am here with an essay. I really don't know how many of you have heard of this essay or read it, but I think if you have never read it, you will enjoy it. Though it is written long back because it is written by George Bernard Shaw, and the title of this essay is Freedom. Let's read it together. Freedom by George Bernard Shaw. What is a perfectly free person? A person who can do what he likes, when he likes, and where he likes, or do nothing at all if he prefers it. Well, there is no such person, and there never can be any such person. Whether we like it or not, we must all sleep for 1/3 of our lifetime, wash and dress and undress. We must spend a couple of hours eating and drinking. We must spend nearly as much in getting about from place to place. For half the day, we are slaves to necessities which we cannot shirk. Whether we are monarchs with 1,000 servants or humble laborers with no servants but their wives. And the wives must undertake the additional heavy slavery of childbearing if the world is still to be peopled. These natural jobs cannot be shirked, but they involve other jobs which can. As we must eat, we must first provide food. As we must sleep, we must have beds and bedding in houses, with fireplaces and coals. As we must walk through the streets, we must have clothes to cover our nakedness. Now, food and houses and clothes can be produced by human labor, but when they are produced, they can be stolen. If you like honey, you can let the bees produce it by their labor and then steal it from them. If you are too lazy to get about from place to place on your own legs, you can make a slave of a horse. And and what you do to a horse or a bee, you can also do to a man or a woman or a child if you can get the upper hand of them by force or fraud or trickery of any sort, or even by teaching them that it is their religious duty to sacrifice their freedom to yours. So be aware. Be aware if you allow any person or class of persons to get the upper hand of you. They will shift all that part of their slavery to nature that can be shifted onto your shoulders. And you will find yourself working for 8 to 14 hours a day when, if you had only yourself and your family to provide for, you could do it quite comfortably in half the time or less. The object of all honest governments should be to prevent your being imposed on in this way. But the object of most actual governments is exactly the opposite. They enforce your slavery and call it freedom, but they also regulate your slavery, keeping the greed of your masters within certain bounds. When chattel slavery of the Negro short costs more than wage slavery. They abolish chattel slavery and make you free to choose between one employment or one master and another. And this they call a glorious triumph for freedom, though for you it is merely the key of the street. When you complain, they promise that in future you shall govern the country for yourself. They redeem this promise by giving you a vote and having a general election every 5 years or so. At the election, two of their rich friends ask for your vote, and you are free to choose which of them you will vote for to spite the other. A choice which leaves you no freer than you were before, as it does not reduce your hours of labor by a single minute. But the newspapers assure you that your vote has decided the election and that this constitutes you a free citizen in a democratic country. The amazing thing about it is that you are fool enough to believe them. Now, mark another big difference between the natural slavery of man to nature and the unnatural slavery of man to man. Nature is kind to her slaves. If she forces you to eat and drink, she makes eating and drinking so pleasant that when we can afford it, we eat and drink too much. We must sleep or go mad. But then sleep is so pleasant that we have great difficulty in getting up in the morning. And firesides and families seem so pleasant to the young that they get married and join building societies to realize their dreams. Thus, instead of resenting our natural wants as slavery, we take the greatest pleasure in their satisfaction. We write sentimental songs in praise of them. A tramp can earn his supper by singing Home Sweet Home. The slavery of man to man is the very opposite of this. It is hateful to the body and to the spirit. Our poets do not praise it. They proclaim that no man is good enough to be another man's master. The latest of the great Jewish prophets, a gentleman named Marx, spent his life in proving that there is no extremity of selfish cruelty at which the slavery of man to man will stop if it be not stopped by law. You can see for yourself that it produces a state of continual civil war, called the class war, between the slaves and their masters, organized as trade unions on one side and employers' federations on the other. St. Thomas More held that we shall never have a peaceful and stable society until this struggle is ended by the abolition of slavery altogether, and the compulsion of everyone to do his share of the world's work with his own hands and brains, and not to attempt to put it on anyone else. Naturally, the master class, through its parliaments and schools and newspapers, makes the most desperate efforts to prevent us from realizing our slavery. From our earliest years, we are taught that our country is the land of the free, and that our freedom was owned for us forever by our forefathers when they made King John sing Magna Carta. Sorry, when they made King John sign Magna Carta, when they defeated the Spanish Armada, when they cut off King Charles' head, when they made King William accept the Bill of Rights, when they issued and made good the American Declaration of Independence, when they won the battles of Waterloo and Trafalgar on the playing fields of Eton, and when they quite unintentionally changed the German, Austrian, Russian, and Ottoman empires into republics. When we grumble, we are told that all our miseries are our own doing because we have the vote. When we say, what good is the vote? We are told that we have the factory acts and the wages boards and free education and the New Deal and the dole, and what more could any reasonable man ask for? We are reminded that the rich are taxed a quarter, a third, or even a half and more of their incomes. But the poor are never reminded that they have to pay that much of their wages as rent in addition to having to work twice as long every day as they would need if they were free. Whenever famous writers protest against this imposture, say Voltaire and Rousseau and Tom Paine in the 18th century, or Cobbett and Shelley, Karl Marx and Lassalle in the 19th century, or Lenin and Trotsky in the 20th, you are taught that they are atheists and libertines, murderers and scoundrels, and often it is made a criminal offense to buy or sell their books. If their disciples make a revolution, England immediately makes war on them and lends money to the other powers to join her in forcing the revolutions to restore the slave order. When this combination was successful at Waterloo, the victory was advertised as another triumph for British freedom, and the British wage slaves, instead of going into mourning like Lord Byron, believed it all and cheered enthusiastically. When the revolution wins, as it did in Russia in 1922, the fighting stops, but the abuse, the calumnies, the lies continue until the revolutionized state grows into a fast rate military power. Then our diplomatists, after having for years denounced the revolutionary leaders as the most abominable villains and tyrants, have to do a right turn and invite them to dinner. Now, though this prodigious mass of humbug is meant to delude the enslaved class, only it ends in eluding the master class much more completely. A gentleman whose mind has been formed at a preparatory school for the sons of gentlemen, followed by a public school and university course, is much more thoroughly taken in by the falsified history and dishonest political economy and the snobbery taught in these places than any worker can possibly be, because the gentleman's education teaches him that he is a very fine fellow, superior to the common run of men, whose duty it is to brush his clothes, carry his parcels, and earn his income for him. And as he thoroughly agrees with this view of himself, he honestly believes that the system which has placed him in such an agreeable situation and done such justice to his merits is the best of all possible systems, and that he should shed his blood and yours to the last drop in its defense. But the great mass of our rack rented, underpaid, treated as inferiors, cast off on the dole workers cannot feel so sure about it as a gentleman. The facts are too harshly against it. In hard times such as we are now passing through, their disgust and despair sometimes lead them to kick over the traces, upset everything, and have to be rescued from mere gangsterism by some Napoleonic genius who has a fancy for being an emperor and who has the courage and brains and energy to jump at the chance. But the slaves who give 3 cheers for the emperor might just as well have made a cross on a British or American ballot paper as far as their freedom is concerned. So far, I have mentioned nothing but plain natural and historical facts. I draw no conclusions, for that would lead me into controversy, and controversy would not be fair when you cannot answer me back. I do not even ask you to draw your own conclusions, for you might draw some very dangerous ones unless you have the right sort of head for it. Always remember that though nobody likes to be called a slave, it does not follow that slavery is a bad thing. Great men like Aristotle have held that law and order and government would be impossible unless the persons the people have to obey are beautifully dressed and decorated, robed and uniformed, speaking with a special accent, traveling in first class carriages of the most expensive cars, or on the best groomed and best bred horses, and never cleaning their own boots or doing anything for themselves that can possibly be done by ringing a bell or ordering some common person to do it. And this means, of course, that they must be made very rich without any other obligation than to produce an impressions of almost godlike superiority on the minds of common people. In short, it is contended you must make men ignorant idolaters before they will become obedient workers and law abiding citizens. To prove this, we are reminded that although 9 out of 10 voters are common workers, it is with the greatest difficulty that a few of them can be persuaded to vote for members of their own class. When women were enfranchised and given the right to sit in parliament, the first use the first use they made of their votes was to defeat all the women candidates who stood for the freedom of the workers and had given them years of devoted and distinguished service. They elected only one woman, a titled lady of great wealth and exceptionally fascinating personality. Now, this, it is said, is human nature, and you cannot change human nature. On the other hand, it is mentioned that the human nature is the easiest thing in the world to change if you catch it young enough, and that the idolatry of the slave class and the arrogance of the master class are themselves entirely artificial products of education and of a propaganda that plays upon our infants long before they have left their cradles. An opposite mentality could it is argued, be produced by a contrary education and propaganda. You can turn the point over in your mind for yourself. Do not let me prejudice you one way or the other. The practical question at the bottom of it all is how the income of the whole country can best be distributed from day to day. If the earth is cultivated agriculturally in vast farms with motor plows and chemical fertilizers, and industrially in huge electrified factories full of machinery that a girl can handle, the produce may be so great that an equal distribution of it would provide enough to give the unskilled laborers as much as the managers and the men of the scientific stuff. But do not forget that when you hear tales of modern machinery enabling one girl to produce as much as 1,000 men could produce in the reign of good Queen Anne, that this marvelous increase includes things like needles and steel pens and matches, which we can neither eat nor drink nor wear. Very young children will eat needles and matches eagerly, but the diet is not a nourishing one. And though we can now cultivate the sky as well as the earth by drawing nitrogen from it to increase and improve the quality of our grass and consequently of our cattle and milk and butter and eggs, nature may have tricks up her sleeve to check us if the chemists exploit her too greedily. And now, to sum up, wipe out from your dreams of freedom the hope of being able to do as you please all the time. For at least 12 hours of your day, nature orders you to do certain things and will kill you if you don't do them. This leaves 12 hours for working, and here again, nature will kill you unless you either earn your living or get somebody else to earn it for you. If you live in a civilized country, your freedom is restricted by the laws of the land enforced by the police, who oblige you to do this and not to do that and to pay rates and taxes. If you do not obey these laws, the courts will imprison you and, if you go too far, kill you. If the laws are reasonable and are impartially administered, you have no reason to complain because they increase your freedom by protecting you against assault, highway robbery, and disorder generally. But as society is constituted at present, there is another far more intimate compulsion on you, that of your landlord and that of your employer. Your landlord may refuse to let you live on his estate if you go to chapel instead of to church, or if you vote for anybody but his nominee, or if you practice osteopathy, or if you open a shop. Your employer may dictate the cut, color, and condition of your clothes as well as your hours of work. He can turn you into the street at any moment to join the melancholy band of lost spirits called the unemployed. In short, his power over you is far greater than that of any political dictator could possibly be. Your only remedy at present is the trade union, a weapon of the strike, which is only the old oriental device of starving on your enemy's doorstep until he does you justice. Now, as the police in this country will not allow you to starve on your employer's doorstep, you must starve on your own if you have one. The extreme form of the strike, the general strike of all workers at the same moment, is also the extreme form of human folly, as if completely carried out, it would extinguish the human race in a week and the workers would be the first to perish. The general strike in is trade unionism gone mad. Sane trade unionism would never sanction more than one big strike at a time, with all the other trades working overtime to support it. Now, let us put the case in figures. If you have to work for 12 hours a day, you have no freedom at all. If you work 8 hours a day, you have 4 hours a day to do what you like with, subject to the laws of the land and your possessions of money enough to buy an interesting book or pay for a sit at the pictures or at a football match or whatever you fancy maybe. But even here, nature will interfere a good deal. For if your 8 hours work has been of a hard physical kind, and when you get home you want to spend your 4 hours in reading my books to improve your mind, you will find yourself fast asleep in half a minute, and your mind will remain in its present benighted condition. I take it. Then, then that 9 out of 10 of us desire more freedom. And that is why we listen to wireless talks about it. As long as we go on as we are, content with a vote and a dole, the only advice we can give one another is that of Shakespeare's Iago, put money in thy purse. But as we get very little money into our purses on payday, and all the rest of the week, like other people are taking money out of it, Iago's device is not very practical. We must change our politics before we can get what we want, and meanwhile, we must stop gr- gassing about freedom, because the people of England in the lump don't know what freedom is, never having had any. Always call freedom by its old English name of leisure, and keep clamoring for more leisure and more money to enjoy it in return for an honest share of work. And let us stop singing Rule Britannia until we make it true. Until we do, let us never vote for a parliamentary candidate who talks about our freedom and our love of liberty for whatever political name he may give himself. He is sure to be at bottom an anarchist who wants to live on our labor without being taken up by the police for it as he deserves. And now, suppose we at last win a lot more leisure and a lot more money than we are accustomed to, what are we going to do with them? I was taught in my childhood that Saturn will find mischief still for idle hands to do. I have seen men come into a fortune and lose their happiness, their health, and finally their lives by it as certainly as if they had taken daily doses of rat poison instead of champagne and sugars. It is not at all easy to know what to do with leisure unless we have been brought up to it. I will therefore leave you with a conundrum to think over. If you had your choice, would you work for 8 hours a day and retire with a full pension at 45? Or would you rather work 4 hours a day and keep on working until you are 70? Now, don't send the answer to me, please. Talk it over with your wife. This essay, Freedom, is one of the series of radio talks that was delivered by George Bernard Shaw on 18th of June 1935 on the BBC. The radio talk as an essay was published in the Listener on 26th of June the same year. And here, with his characteristic sneer, Shaw discusses the true meaning of freedom and its present day implication. His simple talk is actually a denunciation of the conventional and capitalist view of freedom. And I have to mention this, that though it has been written long back in the year 1935, I think it is also relevant today, even. Not completely, but mostly. Though it is 21st century now, I think it is definitely relevant, and that is why I am reading it. I don't know how many of you have already read it, or how many of you are here who is for the first time listening it. Let me know in the comment section, how do you think it is still contemporary, and what is your view on it? What is freedom? What do you think freedom is? Thank you so much for being patient and listening to this essay along with me. See you soon.